Now, make no mistake, General Electric has done a fantastic job at the cleanup to date, as designed. But the problem of contamination that will exist beyond the scope of the current cleanup has been well known for quite many years. Federal, state, and independent scientists have long understood this issue. Most recently, we've seen this reflected in a 2011 study by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, Lower Hudson fish tissue study through the Hudson River Foundation also has noted that the presence of PCB contaminants that will remain after the cleanup is deemed complete by the Environmental Protection Agency represents an economic ball and chain on New York State. We've heard today of the risks and loss of opportunities to New Yorkers that this situation presents. There's impacts to public health. There's impacts on the potential to revitalize the waterfronts and realize the full potential of our tourism and manufacturing economy, both in the river as well as the Champlain Canal. And there are major impacts on natural resources and fish populations. New York State is also confronted with the real possibility that the impending natural resource damage claim that's being advanced by federal trustees, monies could be directed outside of New York State, as the federal trustees are not required to invest funds through a settlement in a damaged resource. For all of these reasons, that's why we're calling on General Electric today to accept their moral responsibility, their legal responsibility, and the impending liability under the Natural Resource Damage Assessment now. We're asking them to do right by the river and to commit to a more extensive cleanup. Nothing less will satisfy the public's interest and secure the company's legacy here in New York State. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, everyone else, in terms of the speakers here. Before we take questions, if there are some, I want to also thank our two environmental partners who have been very much essential to all this. Clearwater and the Riverkeeper have been tremendous partners on this and play a crucial role in statewide environmental work as well. So let me ask if there are questions. I'd be happy to answer. We have a few minutes for that. Yes, sir.
You made it clear that they're not going to continue with their cleanup effort. They said that repeatedly. Is there any plans for a lawsuit from any of the groups or all the groups together? Those of us that are in the media have asked them in the last year many times over, and they give us the same exact statement that they're going to be finished when this dredging project is.
Well, there's a couple of things. I mean, there's two different bases of liability under the Superfund Act. So what GE is referring to now is their remedial liability that's overseen by EPA. There's still that natural resource damage liability that could be used to perform additional dredging. So I think when GE is saying, you know, it's not going to do any additional dredging under the remedy, it's only talking about that EPA portion. Additionally, some new information has come out as recently as last week, a modeling study from NOAA that calls into question whether the EPA remedy will actually, or the performance standards for the EPA remedy will actually be met. That EPA may have been overly optimistic when it did its initial modeling, and that calls into question the legal sufficiency of the remedy as it's currently being performed. In terms of any sort of future legal action, we're obviously looking into legal options, at this time.
Yes, sir.
This doesn't involve legal action, but what it does involve is a moral and social action. And the real question is whether GE wants to be known as the company who polluted the Hudson River, or if they want to be known as the company that cleaned it up. That's a pretty simple statement. And I don't know whether it takes the law for GE to make that decision. Thank you.
Anyone else want to respond?
You know, I might, may I?
Yeah, sure.
One thing that from the business perspective, you know, I certainly leave it to others to talk about legal issues, but what I'm hopeful for is that as companies want to utilize the canal more for a transportation resource, We have a lot of studies and documentation about how the rails have been clogged up, right? And we all know the highways are clogged up, et cetera. Canal sits empty most of the year, both the Mohawk and Hudson River. Both of them could be used more often. And as companies come forward that want to use them, that may help encourage investment to help keep the waterways open. And that, of course, is going to continue to keep this conversation alive about the actual how to go about doing that. So I think that's part of the equation. If we get more industry involved in wanting to use the Hudson, there'll be more dollars available to make sure that the river is kept open.
What else? Great, thank you. Other questions? Yes.
My question is, if you could just talk a little bit about where the EPA and the Cuomo administration is on this, and whether you think that it's sufficient.
So right now, what we've heard from EPA is that they're overseeing the remedy, the current remedy, as designed. I'm not sure if they've had a chance to digest some of the new information that's come out from NOAA, so it'll be interesting to see if there is any change there. We do know that EPA is comfortable with leaving the dewatering facility open while an NRD settlement is being negotiated, if it's being negotiated, and that it considers using, or that it's not opposed to using the current site for restoration dredging as part of an NRD settlement. In terms of the state, I mean, the state has an important role to play as one of the natural resource damage trustees, and we know DEC has been working in tandem with NOAA and U.S. Fish and Wildlife over the last 10 to 12 years, setting the monumental damages that GE now faces.
But in terms of the state angle, though, the canal system's a state asset. The Constitution says the canals have to be dredged to a certain depth. It's in the Constitution.
That's correct.
Has Cuomo
Yeah.
spoken out about this, or DEC, or the Canal Corp?
Not as of yet, but you're correct that there is an obligation on the Canal Corporation to dredge the canals to a certain depth. And the state actually sued over that in 2001. It was dismissed on ripeness grounds because the state had not applied for a dredging permit yet from Army Corps of Engineers. And the state applied for a permit in, I want to say, 2012, and that permit is pending. So that may be an additional avenue to achieve dredging in the navigation canal. But I should note that a lot of the toxic hotspots that we're talking about now fall outside of the canal area. So the federal trustees, when they applied, the Hudson River is broken up into three sections: River Section 1, 2, and 3, with a standard for River Section 1 being higher than 2 and 3 for no apparent reason. And the federal trustees found that if you applied the standard for River Section 1 to 2 and 3, you'd come up with an additional 136 acres of toxic hotspots that should be dredged. And about, I don't have exact numbers on this, but maybe about 10 of those acres are within the navigation channel. So even if navigation dredging is achieved, we still have 126 acres of toxic hotspots, and who knows with river movement at this point where those toxic hotspots currently stand.
If I could just one more follow-up question, if I may.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry I was late. This is the river is the largest Superfund site in the United States, correct?
I believe so.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And what's going to happen at the end of this dredging cycle? Will the EPA take it off the Superfund list?
So there's it's so large that it requires a multi-part remedy. So this is one part of a 4-part remedy, and this is just on the EPA side again, not on the natural resource damage side. So part 1 was the plant sites themselves. Part 2 is the river sediments. Part 3, I believe, are some of the islands in the Hudson, and part 4 is the floodplains. So on the floodplains issue, GE is just beginning to study that now. It's doing a remedial investigation and feasibility study. That is just at the very nascent stages of happening. They haven't agreed upon a remedy. They haven't signed a consent decree or a consent order. So the remedial cleanup of the Hudson River, even regardless of what happens with sediment dredging, is going to continue for years, if not decades.
I'll only add with some historical perspective here, which I know many in the room can relate to and attest to. General Electric is a very powerful multinational corporation, and when we were successful in getting them to the table to agree to a record of decision back in 2002, that was no accident. It took all pistons of state, federal, local government, as well as local communities and advocates working together to call upon the company to bring about the kind of change that we wanted to see. That's where we are right now. The momentum is building again. Awareness of this issue has been present for some time. There are 66 municipal resolutions that have been passed in support of a more extensive cleanup. That information has been sent to the governor's office as well as to Jeffrey Immelt, the CEO of General Electric. And so the policies here are not misunderstood. They're understood by all the players. What's really important now and significant about today is the opportunity for the New York State Legislature to speak and for friends representing diverse viewpoints to come together today and put a call on General Electric to get the job done, to do it right, and accept their full responsibility.
There's a big campaign right on now in the media for I Fish New York, the concept of coming to New York and recreating, camping, boating, fishing. And I know that Governor Cuomo is a big fisherman. He likes to fish. We all like to fish. It's a part of our hunting and gathering instinct. But there has to be an asterisk when it comes to the Hudson River because it's catch and release only. And I'm not sure that you want to see that in an ad for coming to New York State and saying, come to New York State, fish our Hudson River, but catch and release only because of the PCB situation. That's not good advertising. And I'm sure that everybody would like to see this cleaned up. Everybody in the state, everybody in the region, and probably a lot of stockholders for GE.
Thanks, Gil. Other questions? Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.